Hey, what's up, everybody? It's the Ninth Wonder coming at you, and today we're going to discuss the possibility of Disney buying out DC. Is this something that can possibly happen, or is this just another internet rumor? Stick with me to find out how I feel about this situation. Okay, so in order to properly address this situation, we need to have some journalistic integrity and do some research. So the first thing I wanted to know was, what was the source of this rumor? And the first thing that I found with a quick Google search was that this rumor started from a CNBC article that was posted on the CNBC website on May 18th by Alex Sherman, and this was posted in the tech section of the website. Now, what's in this article is pretty much an explanation of how the shares of stock were handled between AT&T, Discovery, and Warner Media upon the announcement that Discovery will pretty much be buying out Warner Media from AT&T, and that AT&T would hold on to a small percentage of the company. And that's what the article was about, was like saying, hey, these companies have different shares of stock, and this is what they did in order to make the situation with that stock more palatable, so that if they were to sell off parts of the company down the line, it would be easier to do. Now, let's talk about what isn't in the article. Nowhere in the article does it mention verbatim that they have a source that has something in writing or something verbally saying that Disney is considering buying out DC Comics. Nowhere in the article does it say, hey, well, Discovery is looking to sell DC to Disney. There's nothing like that in there. Now, would Discovery sell DC to Disney? Possibly, if the money was right. But let's think about it from this aspect. If you're Discovery, you just bought DC. Right now, DC's stock is at an all-time low. And I'm not talking about on the stock market. I'm talking about public perception. They are at an all-time low right now, in my opinion, because this company has been moved around and sold so many times recently here. So you have to think, okay, if we just bought this IP and they're at an all-time low, why would we sell them? We're not going to get maximum profits off of this thing. A company like Disney, who doesn't need DC, they're not going to spend a bunch of money on DC because they're already invested into that type of segment. They have the best superhero company going right now in Marvel. Why would they need DC, and why would they pay a premium for DC? And if you're Discovery, why would you buy DC to sell them for cheap? Any good company that buys and acquires an asset, they buy the asset, they build the asset up, and then if they want to sell it, they sell it. If they can build the asset up to make it profitable, then they stick with it until they see reason, or they start to project that, hey, maybe this thing has ran its course for us, or maybe it's getting too big for us to handle internally. So we need to sell this. That way we can maximize our profits off of this IP. So right now, I don't think that Discovery is probably in an immediate state to where they want to sell DC, but I definitely think it's something that's going to happen at one point in time. I think there was a lot of reasons that they bought out Warner Media. I don't necessarily think DC was one of them. I think they wanted other stuff from that company, and DC is something that they said, okay, we got to take this to get that. So yeah, they just pretty much just took that as a part of the deal. But I think they will try to put a little concentrated effort into building DC back up, making them more presentable so that another company can swoop in and buy them, and that way Discovery can make some good money off of the deal. Now, the next thing we want to look at is, if Discovery was to sell DC, why would Disney want to buy this IP? The first reason I could think of was this will give them the biggest brand in the comic book industry under one roof. This also would give Disney a stranglehold on the superhero movie market because they would have the two biggest superhero companies, DC and Marvel. The next thing is that they could, just as I was speaking about, they could take a broken asset, they could rebuild it, and they could sell it down the road if they ever wanted to or ever needed to. There's also a possibility for some cool crossovers and other multimedia collaborations, as well as multiple forms of marketing that they could do. There's so much that they could do as far as, toys and different collaborations with different companies. Like we already see the DC Fortnite crossover, the Marvel Fortnite crossovers. It will open up so much more that they could do with these two companies by having them under one roof and not having to go through copyright infringements just to make a video game or something of that nature. Now let's kind of look at the reasons that Disney wouldn't buy DC. And the first thing that I think of is diminishing returns. And diminishing returns is when you invest so much into something that eventually it makes it hard for that investment to pay off. Because right now, you think about it, Disney is spending billions every year on making Marvel Cinematic Universe products. Whether it be movies, video games, TV shows. You can only do so much of that. Like if we had a new Disney Plus TV show every month from Marvel, they would stop being special after a while and people would tune out. If we had a new Disney Marvel movie every month, they would stop being special after a while and people would tune out. Now, if you kind of look back at Disney's history, even on a smaller level with how they resell some of their old movies, like let's say Lion King, for example, when DVDs and Blu-rays were still around, Disney had a subscription service to where you would get a new movie sent to you every month. Just first of the month, they bill your credit card and they send you out the Lion King. They send you out the Little Mermaid. And you could basically go on and pick, what movie you wanted. But it wasn't like you could just go through their whole catalog. They rotated those movies out. Some movies went into the vault to where, hey, this movie, we're not going to make this available for purchase for a couple of years. Because they understand if anybody can just go into any store at any time and purchase those Blu-rays or those DVDs, that they wouldn't have the same intrinsic value as they do if, man, I wanted to watch Lion King with my kids, but I went everywhere and I just could not find that movie. It kind of helps build a little rarity to it, and you just don't see Lion King and Disney movies like that running on network TV 24/7. Now with the Disney Plus app, they have more incentive to add those movies on there to where you could watch them freely, because then guess what? There's no middleman in that. Everything is going directly to Disney. So they're turning such a high profit on that stuff now that they can be a little bit more free with how they deliver that content to the public. So diminishing returns is something I definitely think Disney would consider if they're buying DC. Like, hey, we're already doing superhero movies. Why do we need to add more onto that? The next thing would be inferior product. Right now, some people will disagree. DC fans, I know you guys will probably disagree. This is not a shot at you. No disrespect, but Marvel is looked at as a superior product to DC. So it's like, why would we add the B company in the superhero market to our portfolio when we already have the A company? From a money standpoint, like, yes, they could probably turn DC around and make them profitable and make them a cool company again, but it would take a lot of money and a lot of time, which means those same people who built the MCU up, you will probably need their attention to help build DC up. And then what happens is that the MCU is going to suffer. So why would you take your best people away from the MCU to build up DC, and then that one is going to suffer? It just doesn't make any sense. And you have to think about a company like Disney. They're the best at most things they do, or they're near the best. They're almost class of industry and everything. So it's kind of like, hey, why would I go back and add in a product that most people don't even see as superior? So you have to look, when Disney goes and buys stuff out, it's normally stuff that's at the top of the class. Like Star Wars, even when those movies were at their worst, people still considered Star Wars to be a god tier content. You know, it's still looked at as a god tier IP. So look, the way Disney operates, I don't see them buying DC right now just because of the public perception on DC. Now, you also have to think the business side. There's going to be too many hoops to jump through in order to make that acquisition possible. When these companies try to do mergers and buyouts, that stuff costs hundreds of millions of dollars sometimes to make happen, or even to try to make happen, only to be held up to government scrutiny, and the government saying, well, no, you can't buy this company because that will give you a monopoly within this realm of business, and we're not going to allow that to happen. Which, if Disney bought DC, that's something that could possibly get the monopoly in several different fronts. So I just think the headache of trying to get that through government regulation would be too much of a headache for Disney to deal with. And coming off of COVID-19, Disney already has a lot on this plate of trying to figure out what they're going to do with MCU as well as all their other movies. They got the amusement parks to worry about. It's just like, nah, fam, we good. We're going to stick on working with what we got, and we're not going to get too much into the other stuff. Let's see. What's the next thing I got here? Okay. Who would be more likely to buy DC than Disney? And there's a lot of good candidates here, but there's a dark horse that I think nobody is paying attention to that could come in and definitely make this thing work. So the first company I considered was Apple. They definitely could use an IP like DC because they're an underdog in the streaming platforms right now. And Apple TV, needs that type of superhero element, I would think. But, do they know how to handle an IP such as DC? Do they have the infrastructure to support everything that DC needs? Because DC is in film, they're in TV, they're in comics, you got animation. There's a lot going on with DC, so you just can't have any old company come along and say, hey, we're going to buy this and we're going to make this company successful. You have to have someone that knows what they're doing and already has an infrastructure in place to support DC. Netflix, that was another company that I looked at, and I feel like Netflix wasn't an option because they already have plans in place that better fit their image and direction that they're going in with their content. They got to deal with Boom Studios, they got Millar World, so I feel like they're kind of finding their niche in the universe of comic books and superheroes, and I think Netflix is going to be okay in regards to that. Amazon, same thing. They got Invincible. They got The Boys. I think Amazon is going to go for more edgier content, and that's going to kind of be their staple in all of this. I think Amazon is going to be the bad boys of the comic book streaming content, and that's where they're going to sink their teeth into. That's where they're going to sink their teeth into this market. Now, another thing that you want to consider with all of these platforms is that they have to be diverse in the type of IPs that they have underneath them. You're never going to see a platform just have all superhero shows. That wouldn't do good because that would only cater to one audience, and these streaming platforms want to cater to multiple audiences so that a family can have one Netflix account, but there's something on there for everybody in the family. If you think Netflix has sports stuff, they have superhero stuff, they have drama, they have reality, they have cooking shows, they have home improvement shows. Everything is on there, which was a big reason that Discovery bought out Warner, because they wanted to build their Discovery Plus platform up, and Warner had a lot of IPs outside of DC that would allow them to do that. So when I look back at all the companies out there who could possibly buy DC, there's one that nobody is talking about that makes more sense to me than any other company out there. And that company will be NBC. NBC has a new streaming platform, Peacock. They're spending big money on Peacock. And proof of that is, look at the WWE deal they did. that shows a willingness to spend money. They spent billions to buy out the WWE network in America and to move that over to Peacock. And it's also going to cost them a lot of money to move all of those features that was on the WWE network version of that app and to get them over to Peacock, as well as all of the documentaries and all of the old wrestling shows and everything of that nature. So to me, NBC is showing that, hey, we're willing to get our hands dirty and we're willing to spend money to make this stuff happen so that we can have more diverse content for our streaming platform. Now, if you think about it, DC doesn't have any real superhero. I mean, not DC, but NBC doesn't have any really strong superhero properties underneath their belt. So if they were to come in and buy DC, that would give them an automatic player, a big player in the game with a decent back catalog of TV shows, movies, everything of that nature. And say what you want about those CW shows. Those CW shows, they give views. Or else it wouldn't have been on TV as long as it has. And those attract to a casual fans who don't know a lot about comic books. Yes, hardcore comic book readers and collectors, those shows are probably not going to appeal to them. But to people that say, hey, I've been watching these Marvel movies, I want to learn more about DC, those CW shows are a great place for them to start, because the way they write those shows, they're not too far from your regular network TV drama or comedy, etc., etc. It gives you a good place to start, so that you can say, hey, well, I know who the Flash is, I know who Black Lightning is from watching these shows. So that's the big point about those CW shows, is that they give you a place to start with and build up those casual fans, which is very important. NBC could do the same thing because they already have the TV infrastructure in place as well as the streaming. Also, you have to think, all right, you look over here, Universal is the parent company of NBC. They know how to do movies. They have an infrastructure in place for that. Another thing that's considered is that The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, has a TV show on NBC, but we also know that he's working with DC on several projects as well. So to me, The Rock is going to be a huge part in trying to make DC a more valuable asset and keeping a good working relationship with him. And that's already there with NBC. So they could continue to work with The Rock and possibly give him more power in saying what happens on the DC IPs that he's working on to keep him happy and help build that up. Also, you want to look at it from the aspect of how can the content be delivered, and NBC can handle delivering content in any way that it needs to be delivered. Live TV, streaming, movies. They got all of that locked down. Now, one thing I do worry about is how would it affect the comic book industry if Disney was to buy DC? Personally, I think DC has a better paper quality than Marvel. I feel like they were more proactive as far as the distribution situation goes. You know, them pulling away from Diamond, they did it faster than Marvel did, and Marvel still hasn't completely pulled away from Diamond, so also keep that in mind. Also, how would this affect artists and writers if a large portion of the comic book community was controlled by Marvel, DC, all being underneath the Disney roof? And how would this affect the cost of comics for collectors? If Disney has that much market share, they can essentially do whatever they want with the price of the comics, and even the independents might have to follow suit. If Marvel jacks up, their prices and they're still able to turn a profit on books, then why wouldn't everybody else do it? But when you really just sit back and think about it, yes, DC does have better paper quality, but DC does charge a little bit more for their books. So even if the paper quality did go down and Marvel still jacked the price up for whatever reason, I don't think it will be that bad. But it's just something to think about. that's all I pretty much have for you guys today. I just wanted to touch on this issue because I've seen a lot of people talking about it throughout the community. I would love to know you guys' thoughts and everything of that nature on this particular topic. So if you could, please leave your comments down below, like, subscribe to the channel, and all of that good stuff. Once again, it's the Ninth Wonder. Y'all have a wonderful day, and thank you for checking out the video. I appreciate it.